everyone capitalized on the opportunity to proclaim the gospel as far as that organization is concerned. That is totally antithetical to the sort of like clout chasing accusations that people are making. If you wanted to strike while the iron's hot and to take power or whatever it is that you think that they're doing, it would not have resulted in a gospel presentation, because that's directing attention toward God.
Right.
And that's not that's what I saw. All right, everybody. Welcome to the Bacon Bibles and Barbells podcast. I'm Coach Justin, joined by Coach Bill and Coach Emily. Today, we're going to talk about a reasonable response to Charlie Kirk's death, and commentate a little bit on some of the responses we've seen from people in various circles, and just maybe offer some of our opinion on the matter as far as like a good way to think about this and a reasonable way to think about this, and also talk about some of the what we believe unreasonable ways people have been responding to it, particularly in the Christian circles. We're not talking about the crazy responses of the left, dancing on his grave type of stuff. But before we do that, let's talk briefly about what we've going on in our training. I'll go first real quick. I've got lower body strength is moving where it should. Upper body's coming back really slow. Just still a lot of atrophy. A lot of the nerves on the left, the muscles on the left side are still fairly small. I did bench 300 today for a single, which it's a victory. It's just tough because last year I did it for 11 reps. But it is moving. So I wasn't, a month ago I couldn't have done that. So that's cool. And then I benched like 275 for a couple sets after that, and that actually went pretty well. So making progress. But I was hoping my upper body would be back a little faster. It's just like the left delt is still very small, and I've got a lot of back muscles. The left lat is also small, and so a lot of weakness there. And then, but on the lower body front, though, I squatted 500 for a 3x5 today, which I've never done before. I could have done it. I'm not like it was a PR that I couldn't have done before. It's just that I never wanted to, because it's kind of a brutal thing to do. But I decided today was the day. I wanted to kind of see if I could do it, because as I've mentioned before, I'm thinking about doing 500 for a 5x5 later this year. And with how well it went today, it would be there probably in a month or two if I want to. So, who knows, if I did like a 2-hour long training session and rested forever between sets, it probably could be. The last set was rough. It was definitely rough. It wasn't a max, but it sucked. But that's pretty much it for me. I'm still eating maintenance, weights holding. I'm up to 260 right now, but I think that's just from just training and everything else, and actually like training hard and just a little more water retention and stuff like that. But no real composition changes at this point. And also I'm guessing I probably put some of the muscle back on that I lost, which is probably a few pounds or something. So, Bill, how about you? You're all beat up.
I am. I tweaked my hamstring the other day warming up for deadlifts. So word to the wise there, don't warm up into your 85% range when you're just coming back from not doing deadlifts for 7
when you haven't done deadlifts in a while.
Yeah. So I get a little tweak. That one's not bad. It's just a little tiny pull. It's not even painful. I can just feel the pressure. Mm-hmm. And of course I was able to spot it and stop immediately on the way up. I had broken the floor. I was about halfway up, and I was able to stop and drop and go, stop there. But felt good coming off the floor. So it'll be fine. I'm just going to warm back up into it. I'll stay in the 300s for a few weeks, and then we'll go from there. My elbow, I landed on my elbow weird or something, and now I can't bear any weight on my left elbow. So I think it was at jiu-jitsu. We had an open mat on Sunday, and I think I just had kind of a wild scramble somewhere. Ligament is definitely messed up. The elbow's a little loose. Pretty painful. So I'm going to give it a couple days, get some BPC 157, TB 500 going, right at the edge of the forearm there where it meets the elbow socket. And I'll give that a couple days. I'll probably do heat over ice. The traffic jams sort of already happened there, so I'll get some heat going.
Yeah.
And then I probably will continue working light with the elbow. So still doing curls, still doing extensions, things like that. But I'll probably wrap it extremely tight. So I'll take an ace bandage and do a cross wrap on it. And I'll wrap it almost tight enough to cut some vascular supply off, but not totally. Maybe about 50%. And then I'll work with that on, and then I'll release it at the end of the workout.
Yeah.
And then otherwise, I'll just put some additional focus back on my quads. Shoulders are fine. I can work my shoulders. That's no big deal. I've got cuffs and all kind of stuff I can do that with. So that's not a problem. And then the other thing is I've been working on, I've been doing a lot of mobility stuff lately to try to get sort of my hips loose. I was having some tightness in my hips. I had almost gotten my front split on my left side recently, and I tried to pull myself down with my bed frame, and I tweaked my hip, and it did not like it. And now it's like scary of that depth. And so what I'm doing right now is using weight to hold a very long lunge and just put some load on the hips there with a belt. Let it hold at a range above that deepest range, strengthen, and then just sort of get lower and lower as it goes. And then, of course, doing one of my favorite lunge deadlifts, just using a barbell underneath the leg that you're kneeling with, like the one that's up, I should say. And you're basically just deadlifting into a lunge stretch position, I should say.
Yeah.
So when you think of a lunge stretch, you're down on one knee, you're stretched forward. You're basically just allowing your hip to extend with weight on it by using that barbell in a deadlift fashion, that hinge fashion on the way up. So that's helped a lot. So the hips feel good. Just got to get my hamstring cooperating, elbow cooperating, and then we'll be like a whole human again.
Check.
But lots of walking and like step mill and stuff like that in the meantime. So step mill, lots of walking, still keeping active. I love a spin bike. This is one thing I was going to talk about on one of my stories. I like them because they're weighted, and you can really push your quads on a spin bike. You can push them really hard for a long time.
Awful.
And you still get good type 2 muscle fiber exposure because it's so explosive. That's why I love the weighted wheel on a spin bike. And so that's a great option. If you're injured, spin bike is amazing because you can really turn up the intensity and force those type 2 muscle fibers to work. And if you've ever seen an indoor biker, they got quads that are just ridiculous.
They have the biggest, they have like bodybuilder size quads. Yeah. And the circular track ones. Yeah. They have like crazy quads. Emily, how about you?
Yeah, I've just been still doing the same. I've got like a lower push day, upper push day, lower pull day, 3 days a week sort of thing. So I'm still working back into that style of training. And so the main movements on those days, I've just still been like, whenever I go back into it, I always just do a linear progression up until I start hitting a wall a little bit. And that seems to work really well for me for like just working at getting the mental and the physical back of just like, oh yeah, this is heavy in my hands, heavy on my back. I like actually lost that skill. So I'm still linear progressing both my deadlift and my bench and my squat for now. So getting up there with some of those, but I'm hoping I have some numbers in my mind of like, 3x8s, 3x5s I'd like to hit. Hopefully I can get there before hitting a wall and then just kind of go from there and start playing with more sets and reps, that sort of thing. This week, that's 2 weeks. We've had a cold. Justin had it last week. I got it this week. So today I just did light stuff and that sort of thing, but it still felt really good to move and just get some blood flow. Honestly, I felt way better after, than I did going in. So that was nice. We have a home gym and a great setup. So I wasn't going to get anybody sick, like at a public gym. I could just go out there and do what I wanted. And
That's nice. That's nice. My wife's got strep right now.
Oh, my grief.
Had strep. So
I have never had strep, just knock on wood.
I haven't either. Not that I
only had it once. It was terrible.
Yeah. All right, cool. Let's move on to our topic. So, as everybody knows, Charlie Kirk was shot about a month ago now, almost exactly, I believe, actually, because it was like the 10th of September, if I'm not mistaken. So this will probably be released in the next few days. So probably about the 1 month of him being shot. Everyone I think knows who he is. And he was particularly characterized by what I would call being very reasonable. He went into situations and gave talks and did Q&As and stuff like that were live, in person. And the topics were obviously very provocative, political and Christian related, mix of both. And, you can see videos of him, people basically, cussing him out and accusing him of all sorts of things. He always maintained a calm demeanor. And I think it was pretty obvious that he had a care for the people he was talking to. There was, he didn't let people rile him up. And so that was sort of like his thing, was being the reasonable guy. And obviously he's, I think the reason now, I think speaking for myself, his death was obviously a surprise, but it hit me very hard. And I know a bunch of other guys I've talked to, other guys in the podcasting space, other men that I know, kind of hit harder than a lot of other, because there's, John MacArthur died a couple months ago, and a lot of other great men have died recently. But I think a difference was, I think a lot of us feel that he was more us than some of the others. He was, a dad. He was trying to be reasonable in an unreasonable world. He wasn't contentious. He was generally caring toward the people that he interacted with, even though they didn't care for him. And so I think that this is the nature of living in a fallen world, of course. And I think that our immediate response obviously should be to mourn with those who mourn, but I'd also say rejoice that, it was a good that came of it, was the gospel being proclaimed to more people at once than has probably ever happened in human history. 100 million people tuned into that live stream. I think there was 200,000 people inside the stadium and in the parking lot in Arizona. And I don't know if that's ever happened I don't know if the gospel's ever been proclaimed to that many people live in person, but certainly on a live stream, 100 million, that's almost a third of the American population. And I'm sure it was worldwide, but nothing like that's ever happened before. And there were multiple gospel presentations. And a lot of people have been nitpicking, about how imprecisely worded something was that somebody said in any of those gospel presentations and all of that. And I think that I think we should talk about some of that, and then some of the other things that we've seen, people's response toward his wife in the days following and everything else. I think that the people that I'm seeing respond negatively, and this is an accusation to those people. And if you're listening, sorry if you find this offensive, but none of the people that I've seen laying these criticisms are people that are doing anything. I haven't seen anybody that has made any serious sacrifices or to have a voice out there that's trying to have some sort of platform or whatever ministry, whatever you want to call it. I see nitpicking from people that are on the sidelines. And honestly, if you're one of those people, I think that you're speaking out of turn. Until you've done something, you don't really have the right to criticize like that unless there's a flagrant error or heresy or something like that. And that didn't happen. Trump got up and said, I don't, it was almost from his perspective, incomprehensible to forgive, because he was just I hate my enemies. I want them all to fall before me, basically. But I also want to say, I saw a bunch of Christians really criticizing him for that, but I want to offer a little bit of a perspective on that too before we get into the rest. Trump is the magistrate in our nation right now, and I don't agree with everything he's done, everything he is, everything he stands for, that he's written or said, and all that. But the magistrate's job is to bear the sword. And so his prerogative when he speaks as president, not necessarily as a man, is not to forgive. We should not have magistrates that err on the side of forgiveness. That is not how Romans 13 describes a functional government that's been ordained by God. And so, he was also probably speaking as a man, and personally, I get that. But at the same time, I want a magistrate that will see sin and see a crime and go, this needs to be dealt with. We can't forgive that. We might even forgive someone personally, but that doesn't mean that the sword shouldn't be borne against an evildoer like this, especially in the case of a flagrant murder. So, I don't want to dwell on that, but for those Christians that are criticizing, realize that there's kind of two pieces to this. And one is that that's the prerogative of the magistrate. The prerogative of the magistrate is to hunt down murderers and bring them to justice. And under Old Testament law, justice was you will be tried and then you will be executed. That's God's justice. And the magistrate shouldn't be looking around looking for people to forgive in his role. That's not his God ordained role. So as we move on, one thing that I saw was people criticizing, especially his wife, widow now, for not being perfectly precise in her articulation of the gospel. And that reminds me of Job. Job, in the worst moment of his life, had 3 idiots come to him and criticize him for all these things. And some things he was wrestling with, obviously. He was struggling with his faith in God, which is reasonable when you have everything taken away from you. But I forget the exact reference, but at one point he's like, don't pick apart my words right now. Like, I'm not going to speak precisely. Mm-hmm. And Christians who, if you name the name of Christ and you are a fan of grace, you should offer that same grace to someone else who, how many of the women and men that are criticizing her this way would be capable of articulating the gospel at all to speak any words to an audience like that? Mm-hmm. How many of you? I would say none.
Yeah, probably none.
What she did was brutally difficult. And I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
From any of these people that are going off on that.
I think the other thing
go ahead.
Consider, well, I was going to say the other thing to consider is that it's grossly inappropriate, even if you're pointing out something that's a pragmatic error. If there's a pragmatically erroneous statement, it's inappropriate in a time of grief to do that. It's just socially inappropriate. It's theologically inappropriate.
Yeah.
And it is never okay to speak of someone's widow in that way and go, well, they weren't as precise as I would like them to be in this statement. Therefore, I have questions about their soul and their intention and this and that thing. It's inappropriate because they're in a cycle of grief. And what people need to understand is that grief is cyclical. It's not linear. That's the most bizarre part of this. Where they go, well, she needs to be mourning for 6 months and then do blah, blah, blah. That's not how grief works. If you've ever lost somebody, especially somebody violently or suddenly, it's one of those things that years down the road, you smell a scent or you hear something and it reminds you of them. And all of a sudden you're back in the cycle of grief. It's never linear. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is that in America, we lack a cultural closure to death. We don't do things like pilgrimages to the grave or write a letter to the dead person, releasing yourself from the hold of grief. We don't do any of those things. There's no cultural practices that we take that are metaphoric for the release of grief. And so it's harder. And what we do is we then have long-term grief that's cyclical. We deal with it as much as we can at one time, and then we move on from it as far as we can. And then it just sort of comes back and cycles for the remainder of life, right? And I'm not saying either way is right or wrong. there's probably no moral ground there whatsoever, really, unless
It
you're
just
talking about
is.
it. Just is, right? And so how you handle it is different. And in America, we handle it in a way that one week you can be a mess, and the next week you can be giving a speech about carrying forward your murdered husband's vision and things like this, and trying to articulate the gospel to a large crowd when you are likely a bundle of nerves and a probably of 10,000 minds at one time, and so
Yeah.
this is where when you mentioned extending that grace to other people. This is where we need to probably, as Christians, examine ourselves. Are we living by the standard that we are holding? Do we say this is an objective standard of execution and grace? Do we live by that for us, or are we living in open rebellion to the very standard that we are presenting? And I would argue that if you are in this graceless space, then you are living in open rebellion to the very standard that you claim is the objective truth. You are sinning. You are sinning. Nothing short of it.
Yeah.
And so it's not only socially inappropriate, but completely theologically inappropriate for a Christian to do something like that. You would never walk up to someone's mother during their wake, for example, and say, hey, listen, you didn't really articulate the gospel very well there. Can we talk about improving that in the future? What a horrible thing to think or do, right?
Yeah.
I attended a funeral recently of a friend who passed suddenly, and I have no idea what the stance of the speakers or funeral home folks were or anything like that. And I didn't go in there raising Cain about what was being presented here or there about the gospel. She suddenly died. And on the day that her grandson was born, it's a tragedy. Nobody needs to talk about anything except what anyone else needs from them to get through the tragedy. It's astonishing to me. It's astonishing to me.
Yeah. And I think, Bill, going off that point you just made, it's like she did not owe any of us any of that, because like you just said, the response should be, what does she need? How can we care for her? How can we pray for her? And instead, I think this is another part of it. We don't know as a culture, because we just don't live, our culture is so changed from what it used to be. Like what a brave, courageous, moral, godly woman looks like in epic moments like that, when their husband was taken in such a public way, when he was a political figure, like so violently, like you said. And even though she did not owe us any of that, she chose to have courage. She chose to be brave. She chose to be an example of those things for God knows how many other people and women. And it was just something that was very moving to all of us to be able to see that. But I think that's where part of the nitpicking comes from, is like, we only know women who can't get out of their sweatpants and want to hide in bed for 6 months, which isn't necessarily bad, like you said, depending on context and a whole bunch of other things when somebody dies. But to see someone who chooses not to be that, and to be like, I'm going to go and honor my husband in the way that I know he would want me to honor him in this moment, and kind of give my country what I feel would be best for them over my own feelings, that's quite the choice. And we don't see that very often, just culturally.
No.
Yeah, I think she chose to use that as a time to give more than to receive.
Right.
At a time when that was not the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, it's quite selfless, right?
It is. It really is.
Like there's no way she felt like doing that.
No.
A lot of, and people have like accused her of like trying to draw attention to herself. Yeah, give me a break.
Oh, stop.
What
on earth did she do to draw attention to herself? Her husband was publicly murdered. She's got already had all she could ever need.
Yeah, like she doesn't. It wasn't need. Well, and that's not the way that. Honestly, if that's so, to people that have said that kind of thing, I just feel like that's a projection of what they might feel like they might do or something.
Agreed.
Because that's not a natural response to seek attention over. That is an accusation of such a gross sin to use your husband's death to chase clout.
Yeah.
People
Well,
have no
and
idea what they're saying.
that's one of the things that I think people need to realize, especially with all the talk on social media surrounding this on every side of the aisle and all in between, is that much of what's being said when people say, well, they probably did this, or that, she's doing this, or blah, blah, blah. That's exactly what it is. It's a projection. People can't imagine that other people wouldn't do the things that they would do. And so they assume those things onto other people. Now, that's not to say that all of it's completely inaccurate. Everybody's sort of like evil, like we all do like attention and all this kind of, sure. Yeah. I mean, there's some nefarious stuff, even when we try to do good. I get that. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about people that are giving hyper specific statements about somebody's intentions. And it's like, well, all you did was reveal your intentions. Like, that's what you would do. Right. Yeah. And that's why you think it's what they're doing. And so that's something you need to examine. And then it also goes back to your statement about people sitting on the sidelines. This is something that has gotten to me, especially in Christian circles, is a lot of folks are being really, really loud with no action. Yeah. And they need to understand that that's also a form of disobedience. It's misrepresentation. It's bearing false witness. When you say, well, I'm riled up and I'm on board and I'm doing this, and, we need to be thinking about this and doing this, and Christian, you got to do that, and pastor, you got to do this, and you better blah, blah, blah. And they're sitting there in their spiritual armchair, right, doing that the entire time. They are sinning. That's a sin. It's a misrepresentation of yourself. And a lot of times there's a couple things that need to be examined. One is that person's probably afraid. When people get fearful, they get really, really loud. When stuff's uncomfortable, they will grandstand. It's a really common response because it makes them feel better, stronger, safer, etc. Right? And so when Christians amongst each other start to get vitriolic like this, right, we can see that for what it is and say, well, they're not really standing up and doing anything. They're just sort of shouting from the sidelines. That means that you can sort of ignore it. As a Christian, you can just look at that and go, that's silly. I'm not going to engage with that.
Yeah. Well, then, who's the real virtue signaling clout chaser in that situation?
Right. Exactly. You can say that's silly social media stuff. That doesn't even deserve the attention, because the reality of what that person is shouting is less than a whisper. Right. That illusion is the most sincere outrage that a lot of people can produce. It's just the illusion of that. Yeah. Right. And so it can be disheartening, because when we hear a bunch of people talk and they get loud on social media, and then we step onto the battlefield as a Christian, we look around and we go, where is everybody? Where is everybody? There's nobody on this battlefield. And it's not just with situations like this, but if you've ever battled a serious sin in your life, that's true too. Sometimes you'll step out onto the battlefield and you go, yes, there's lots of Christians out here battling this sin. I've got some people that have got my back. And you look around and you go, where is everyone? Right? Yeah. How can this be?
And so, how can Christians not rejoice at a gospel proclamation that reached so many?
Right.
And because it wasn't perfect enough, and because she didn't wait the right amount of days after he died to do it, or like what do you want? Like, what would satisfy your craving for her behaving in whatever way that you think is perfect and right?
I'm sort of convinced that if the Facebook mob exists in Jesus' day, they'd have been crucifying him. So it's it really is wild, and it's insincere, but the parts that are sincere are probably the most alarming, right? Yeah. Which is the ways that people feel about other people, right? Yeah. The judgments they make on other people's intentions because they possess those judgments themselves. It's kind of alarming to hear some of that stuff from people. It makes me wonder, right? Like, if I were to die, is someone going to harass my widow when she tries to make a gospel proclamation? Are they going to say evil stuff to my children? It's horrifying.
Yeah.
Right.
It's horrifying. And to see that coming from within the church is really disappointing. It's really disappointing.
Yeah. My name is Justin Johnson with High Calling Fitness. Maybe you're tired, gaining weight, waking up with joint pain, back pain, and a body that just doesn't feel like it used to. You've tried to fix it, but nothing seems to last. What if you don't need another app or crash diet, but a real coach, someone to meet you where you're at and walk with you step by step? At High Calling Fitness, our coaching comes to you wherever you are. No matter where you live, small town or city, across the country or across the world, your health still matters. You don't have to go it alone. We build personalized plans based on your goals, your schedule, and your equipment, even if it's just a set of dumbbells in a small space. This isn't just training, it's a personal partnership. You'll get weekly updates, one-on-one access to your coach, and ongoing support through Zoom and Slack every step of the way. We're here to help you build strength, restore energy, and claim the life you were meant to live. Book a free consult today. Let's talk about your goals and see how we can build something better together. High Calling Fitness, built for the everyday, ready for the extraordinary. And another crazy thing that I saw people saying was like a concern that some not perfect presentation could lead to some sort of terrible expansion of cultural Christianity. Well, let me give a bunch of you idiots some news. Cultural Christianity was a lot better to live around than the gay stuff we deal with today. And if you think if you think that our nation swinging morally to Christ without actual salvation repentance is a bad thing, then you really need to check up on what human flourishing is all about and what God's design for a culture is.
Even just cultural propriety.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How dare we move back towards cultural Christianity? Yeah. Is it perfect? No. What's perfect is everyone on the earth being saved. But until then, it's not a bad thing if a bunch of people start behaving more Christ-like.
Right. It's
seriously, what do you want? Everyone to be either gay or Christian?
Yeah.
It's really nice. I'll take the return of cultural Christianity 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Over this stuff.
It's like saying, hey, we got a bunch of sociopathic murderers in this country, and but we don't want them to become false converts. So I don't know if I'm satisfied. I don't know if I want to give them the gospel because it might be presented imprecisely. And it's like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
It's that big of a divide. And
it's
even just, by the way, the cultural propriety of cultural Christianity would not have allowed for the indecency of criticizing someone's widow in that situation. It would have been unthinkable.
Oh, it would have never happened 20 years ago. So. People talking like this.
Yeah.
No.
The only reason you're afforded to speak like an idiot is because of how immoral our culture has become. And that's a reflection on your spiritual state more than anything else, if that's you.
Right.
And that says a lot.
It's a good time to do some examination there. And that's not I don't want people to be confused by the passion on these subjects from us. This isn't a statement of condemnation, a blanket statement of condemnation for everybody who's got these problems or has participated in these things. It's a call to repentance. Stop doing it. Examine yourself and go back and go, this was inappropriate. It's gross. It's graceless. It doesn't represent Christ properly. Okay. And some of the more hardened Reformed folks will go, oh, you starting to sound like Tim Keller, blah, blah, blah. Look, this is part of the problem. We had a pendulum swing into the sort of Christless grace movement, right? Where there's no obedience and there's no nothing. But we have a hard swing in the other direction too, where we go, well, it's all obedience and it's all knowledge, but it's zero grace.
Yeah.
I know men that will not embrace another man when they're going through a struggle, right? Because they go, it's effeminate. Well, here's the news for you. Unless you're forcibly doing something effeminately, meaning you're doing something outside of the male wheelhouse on purpose, right?
Yeah.
You're doing it masculinely because you are a man. That's biologically is your construct.
Yeah.
So when people go, well, crying, when a man cries over grief, he loses a child, he cries, he's in his feminine space. No, that's a masculine act because he's
Jesus
a man.
wept when Lazarus died.
Yeah, he's a man doing it.
Right.
Men can only do things masculinely if they're doing them biologically and naturally. They
Yeah.
can't do them effeminately. That's
Yeah.
not possible. So,
Right.
that stuff has got to go.
Yeah.
And we do need again, the Tim Keller. You get this from people. It's just an extension of this. They go,
Yeah.
well, you're turning into Tim Keller. Well, nobody's turning into Tim Keller. Okay, but it's okay to be a little gentle with people when they're in a very porcelain state. It's okay. It's okay to recognize that people have those moments where their backbones are made of glass, and you got to handle them with care, and that goes.
God said he
even for
won't
people who
break a
are-
brued reed.
That's what I'm saying. Even people
So
who
who
are
are we?
addicted, or they have sins, or they have this, or they have that. There's a time to handle them gently.
Yeah.
It's wild that that's lost, and it's crazy that you would not want that culture to come back, where something that horrible would be unthinkable. You go, oh, that would never happen. That would never happen because 20, 30 years ago, especially 50 years ago, no shot.
Yeah.
No shot that that's happening, especially not in a public space. You'd be a pariah.
Right.
And
One
rightly so.
aspect too to like how much this is not clout chasing. Turning Point USA is not an evangelical organization.
Mm-hmm.
It's a political activism organization. It has never been like a gospel presentation focused type of thing.
Right.
And their response to Charlie dying was to platform the gospel. Not the organization. It wasn't some big presentation on donate more money or like it was so, I mean, obviously everything's kind of political, but it was as apolitical as it gets given the context. This was like everyone capitalized on the opportunity to proclaim the gospel as far as that organization is concerned. That is totally antithetical to the sort of like clout chasing accusations that people are making. If you wanted to strike while the iron's hot and to take power or whatever it is that you think that they're doing, it would not have resulted in a gospel presentation because that's directing attention toward God.
Right.
And that's not that's what I saw.
Yeah.
This wasn't like a Republican platforming event.
Right.
Nothing of the sort. It was, we care about the gospel. We proclaim the gospel. It was watching Christians extend grace to a terrible sin. That's what we saw. That is not directing attention to yourself at all. And people like picking apart that she was all done up and all this other stuff. Well, how could she look like that? What do you want her to do? Look trashy?
Yeah.
In front of millions of people? Like, come on. Like, that's important to you?
Right. And she even went above and beyond just giving the gospel. Like in her speech in particular, like she was encouraging young men to be brave, to go get married, to go have families. She explicitly said, Moms, motherhood is your highest ministry. You need to make like a pleasant home for your husband and your kids, and you need to be there. Like that is more than I've heard a lot of Reformed pastors' wives say explicitly.
Or Reformed pastors, by the way.
Or Reformed pastors, yeah.
Like get with the program if you're criticizing this. She gave, like, I'm hearing more, there was more solid, whatever you want to say, biblical advice given in that speech than you'd hear from many Reformed pastors on a Sunday. And certainly, by the way, from almost all Reformed, like, women's Bible study type of settings.
Right.
So, like, where are you going with this, criticizing it? She espoused traditional biblical values in the home. She proclaimed the gospel. She was an example of extending grace to someone that sinned against her. Like, this is everything that we would want a Christian to do.
Right.
And she did, and the criticism is she, her makeup was too good and she didn't wait long enough to do it. Like, what's the standard here? Like, do you think that was easy?
Right. And going off what you said earlier, Bill, like, I think that her forgiveness of that man or whatever, like, was actually the feminine response. Like, you could argue one way or the other, like, she didn't have to, but in her eyes, like, I could see myself, and I think in a feminine way, you don't want to be the one bearing that necessarily, that vengeance, that, like, if you can pass that off to a man in your life, the civil magistrate in your life, the people you trust to get that taken care of, like, that's what I'd want to do. And I think that's what most moms
Should
that
want.
I know, most women should want. They should say like, okay, guys, you go get them. I'm going to go over here and take care of my babies and put my head down and grieve and do what I got to do.
Yeah.
Like, I think that was a very feminine response. And obviously it took a lot of faith, you know, in order to say something like that and feel something like that and actually mean it as well. But to get that off her plate and off her heart and off her mind and say, you guys go get them, I'm going to be over here, I think is a feminine response.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I agree. Yeah. And like, I think an aspect of this too, as we kind of move on, like one thing about Turning Point, it was the platform that it had was because, you know, Charlie was good at business. And as a side effect of all of this, the gospel gets proclaimed. Yeah. The business that it was built a huge platform, a massive platform. And everybody used that to proclaim the gospel in that moment and they didn't deify Charlie. It wasn't even drawing attention to him, because when at his death, all attention was on him. This event basically redirected attention away from Charlie to Christ. How could any Christian do anything but support that wholeheartedly?
Yeah, and that's the question that I think a Christian has to ask themselves too. In the midst of this, are you letting your anger cloud your judgment?
Yeah.
If people are hearing the gospel, don't you want these people to live?
Yeah.
That's what they're trying to do, is give a presentation, because they go, don't you see? Right? Mm-hmm. Not just the people who love Turning Point, the people who hate it, the people who hated Charlie, the people who they're going, don't you see? It doesn't matter. We want you to live. Don't you know we want you to live? You know, it's a beautiful thing. It's wonderful. It should be praised and lauded with approval. It's wild not to affirm such a thing.
Yeah, that's exactly what one of my kids said. They were like, why would they kill him? He was literally trying to give them eternal life.
Yeah, like, and I think the thing is, like, sure, that I understand the critiques from people that say, well, the freaking pyrotechnics and all this kind of stuff, sure, whatever. Like, I get parts of that where you're like, okay, it's a little over the top. I'll grant you, right? It's a little wild, but they also don't have control of that. Like, that's a planner doing that. And it's the person that is not connected potentially, right, with any of the speakers personally. They were probably just hired to do it. Maybe they're connected. Who knows? But you don't know. And you don't know what that person believes or thinks or what kind of opinions they hold on life and all this kind of stuff. And so you can't really put that on the speakers and say, well, it's
I have no problem with it.
You know, yeah, I mean,
like,
again,
have you ever read Isaiah and Revelation, what it's like to be in the throne room of God?
Right. Yeah.
Like,
and so
like if in the right setting, like this is the stuff that if it's going to be big, it's going to be big.
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, I agree. I'm saying, like, even from a pragmatic perspective, if I go, wow, that's a lot of fanfare. Yeah. And if that makes you uncomfortable, I totally understand where you're coming from potentially on that. However, like, how is that Erica Kirk's fault? How is that, like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to blame people who have nothing to do with it, even if you don't like it. Right. For me, I don't have an issue with it, but you know, who knows? Right. Like, even if you do, point your sights at the right direction there. I hate to use that metaphor, but seriously, you know, put your target, put it on the right target. Don't just start, verbally just harassing people over stuff like that.
Yeah. The other thing too, this wasn't a church service. Like, fanfare is okay. They made it big. It's okay to make a big presentation.
I agree.
I think moving on to the next thing, I think one thing I saw were a lot of Facebook posts from people, especially men, basically saying, like, if your pastor doesn't address this, or like some of them were like spend a whole sermon addressing it immediately after, or and I saw the other two, like, if your pastor addresses this, then, like, go find another church, like, on both sides of that.
Right.
And to that, I would say, I think that the pastor of the church should know what his flock needs.
Right.
And at that moment, it might have been addressing it. It might not have. It might have been addressing it a little bit. It might have been addressing it a lot. But he's the one that's responsible for their souls. And I would also say that there's a tendency where if a pastor, the elders of a church have done a right job shepherding their people, then when things like this happen, they need to be addressed. There's less need for them to be addressed directly because the flock is already prepared for how to think through and process such an event.
Yeah.
The more mature, spiritually mature people in the church don't need to hear it addressed directly. And if the pastor's working through a sermon series, there's no reason to stop the sermon series. Not necessarily. If he feels like it needs to be addressed in particular, that's up to their discretion. But like, you don't know what some other flock needs. One person's church is not your church. They're not your responsibility. And this might sound authoritarian because the church is authoritarian. It's not democratic. And if your pastor didn't address it on Sunday at all, maybe that was an oversight on his part, possibly. But maybe he just knew that it wasn't worth addressing to his particular flock because it might not have been necessary. It might not have been worth the deviation. I saw some pastors that spent a moment addressing it directly. I saw some that, I know some that like they basically changed their whole sermon for that week. I think either one could be good if it's done rightly and if it's what seemed appropriate in the moment for their flock's needs. Our pastor addressed it barely and kind of wove parts of it into his sermon and sort of organically. I remember Keith Foskey, who I consider a friend of mine. He basically before his sermon spoke about it for like 2 minutes, and then was like, "And that's all I'm going to say about that," and that was it, because that's what my pastor, that's what Keith, other they knew what their flocks needed. There doesn't have to be some black and white thing of this is how this is going to go. This is how every pastor should do it or whatever. Like, we can't be generalized about that kind of thing. The spiritual needs of one flock differ from another, just like how we as men addressed our families when that happened.
Right.
The people that are under your care need different things at different times based on how in tune you are with their spiritual needs.
Yeah,
and go ahead.
We have people in our church dying of cancer. I love Charlie Kirk. I'm grateful for him as a brother. But the people in our church that are dying of cancer, actively terminal cancers, they need to hear from our series in James that all good gifts come down from the Father of lights, that all things given by God are good because they come from a good and loving Father. Yeah. That's what they need to hear. They don't, I'm sorry, but they just don't need to have a belabored speech on Charlie Kirk. They just don't.
No. Some might, but that's the need of that church. And we need to be, the Reformed world is not very good at nuance.
Yeah.
And of all times, things like this are the times when some nuance needs to be allowed there's different needs at different times in different places for different people. And if you're some person on the internet that's not connected to that church, you have no sense of what that church might need. And so in some churches, not a word might have been spoken about it the Sunday following.
Right.
That could be right or that could be wrong. But the answer is that it depends. And what it depends on is not an answer that anyone here who's disconnected from those churches is prepared to give.
Yeah. And it's never going to be a good move to just leave your church and not talk to your pastor about it.
Yeah.
No, at least speak to your elders. That's good grief. I mean, you want to talk about a plague in the Reformed online space. How about asking random strangers what they think about serious issues in your life?
Oh, Bill, I hate that so much.
Talk to your elders. Go talk to your elders. That's what they're there for.
Yeah.
Good grief.
Yeah.
I mean, my goodness. And we see it all the time. I mean, Justin, you and I have seen it. Yeah. Guys talking about really serious issues on forums, and we're like, what are you doing on this forum with this
Have
issue?
you talked to your elders?
Talk to your elders. You need help. Go to your pastor. Go to your elders. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, it's great to advise one another in a multitude of counsel as men in online forums. It's a great piece of technology that we
Yeah.
have. It's wonderful. However, in some spaces, it's inappropriate. And
Hmm.
in the space of something like a violent murder of a man who is a brother who holds beliefs similar to you, where it might shock you or feel hurtful, right? Or you may see other people celebrating his death in a way that makes you feel hurtful or frightened or upset. Um, you need to be falling on the support of your local church in those moments.
Yeah.
You don't need to be on the internet and in the internet echo chamber tooling around and whatever. And you definitely don't need to be accusing other people's pastors of being less Christian or less masculine or any of the number of things that I saw fly around,
Yeah.
because they're not doing something to your satisfaction, whether it be mentioning or not mentioning Charlie Kirk, etc. Because for every person that said they need to mention Charlie Kirk, here's the funny thing. I heard this and I almost laughed because I was like, well, if you've ever been part of a puritanical board, right, or forum where people are very, very, very reformed in that way,
Extra.
I assure you that you would probably have heard the opposite from them. They'd be like, absolutely no mention of Charlie Kirk in the pulpit on Sunday. That is sacrilege. It is blasphemous. It is, whatever. And so the two sides of that, those crazy extremes, they have no place. Again, this is again from James. I guess we're in it, so I just think of it all the time now. But who are you to judge your brother in this way? This is not an appropriate place to judge your neighbor in this spot. You don't have the authority to do so. And as a Christian, this is one of those spaces where you should probably look up one of the verses on the best times to keep your mouth shut, to keep quiet.
Yeah.
Let
I
the
agree.
local church do
Right.
its thing.
Yeah, that's why it's so important. Part of the reason why it's so important to be in a local church is so that you can be known by your elders and by your people, so that when something happens, they know what you're going through and what you're thinking, because they know you. They know you and your family, and they're going to know how to best care for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that the right Christian response to this, as we kind of wrap things up, is there's aspects of where we should mourn with those who mourn. We should rejoice in a very expansive gospel proclamation, and to make allowances for something not being as precise as we wanted, and still go, a good thing still happened. And kind of leave it at that, and let local churches do their thing, especially like a faithful local church. The elders, they should know what they're doing. And criticizing and nitpicking over how much makeup someone wore, or how, if they didn't wait enough days to mourn or whatever else. Look, capitalizing on a moment to proclaim the gospel is a good thing. Any proclamation of the gospel is a good thing. A big proclamation of the gospel is probably even better. And I think that's where we should basically leave it. All the other nitpicky stuff, I think, is busybody type stuff. Go look after your own household. Go look after your own stewardship, after yourself. Get healthier. Make more babies. Disciple your children. Be involved in your local church. And you probably won't have time or space to be worried about these kinds of things, honestly, if you do all this. Like, don't be policing all the other stuff, especially stuff that's not important, not relevant, and just rejoice with everyone else that the gospel was proclaimed to so many people, and that a good example of extending grace was so public in a way that has never been done since Christ's death. Really, I mean, I don't know what what do you compare it to? But billions of people know this happened. It's got to be in the billions. That's huge. And seeing the response, billions of people, this is a good thing. And all the other criticisms, they should just be laid to rest, as we as Christians can just rejoice in a godly example and the gospel being proclaimed.
Yes.
I think that's all I have to say about it.
Yeah. That's all there is.
Otherwise, focus on what's in your responsibility to control, and be understanding toward people, especially people that are mourning. Get out of your own way. if you're struggling with that. Like,
Yeah.
don't make it about you.
Mm.
Let it be about Christ, like Charlie's wife did.
Yeah. Agreed.
So, well, cool. Well, this is a different podcast, I know, for everyone. I hope this was helpful. If you guys want to reach out, if you have any commentary, anything we just said, whether it's hateful or not, feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to to discuss with any of you guys. But until then, gains and grace, but especially after this topic, grace.
Gains and grace, extra grace.
Gains and grace.